Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Traveling Mollies. I'm Al DeGenova and my co-host, Nina Corwin. Say hi.
And Al, is this your first time back? Because you
Um,
missed the tornadoes.
yes, I missed last month. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, It'd be, yeah, there were tornadoes and I was stuck in Europe with COVID. So, but I'm all recovered and on the mend.
So hoping that everyone's healthy and that we don't blow away this time. We're really excited to have Andrea Change and Timothy David Ray, and really long overdue. Andrea, it was, you were reading at that Michael War event, and I was just blew me away. And Timothy, I'm looking for. I've never heard you read, so. But we're going to get started with the open mic, and usually Al and I start with a piece. So, Al, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, we try to break the ice so that none of our open micers have to go first. So I'm going to read a poem that was just published, except it's so new I don't feel like it's finished. But I sent it off to the Door County Pulse newspaper, and they took that and a few other poems, and so I'll read it for you. It's called Pearl. Distraction a broil behind my eyes like a bubbling, gurgling hookah. The monkey in my brain doing somersaults, sipping a dirty gin martini, promising to tell tales of a me long forgotten. I walk the path through wood and meadow, greening again this May. So many hundreds of steps I've left behind here, my broken body of work. And then what must have always been there, a rusting chair under a huckleberry bush, asking to be known, as if it had been hiding long enough in those shadows. The hookah quiets to an exhale like spring or a darkness waiting for a small touch, or a late night text, the pearl that every poem requires. Thank you. Thank you. Nina?
Yeah, I was just reading an interview. I can't remember who it was, but the person was asked, how do you know when a book is finished? And, or when a collection is finished? And they were saying something like, I have no idea. It could be years after the book comes out and all of that, which is, I can appreciate that. In fact, I'm going to read a poem that is really old because I don't know, it must have been 15 years ago that I finished it or longer. And I just was noodling around with it and still changing. Plus, it's a poem that I read first for the Guild Complex, so it seemed the thing to do. It's called Eve Picks a Bone. Lord, we need to talk. You tear me from my other half so I might know that I am only half indeed. I know. Without this exercise in penitence, you created Eve of rib. Woman knew from the moment of birth that she was just a part of creation, while Adam, silly Adam, while Adam, silly man in magnificent oblivion, still walks the earth and thinks he only lacks a rib. Punishment fits the crime, you say? Yet you see fit to spare your favorite son. You'll see, Lord, because I know him maybe better than yourself, for I am sister, wife, and mother. He'll be raising flags and naming names as though he's God. He's got all your taste for dominion with none of the mercy, and Lord, I am afraid. You say I should have thought of that before I disobeyed your word? Well, okay, fair enough. I understand we've lost Eden, and perhaps that's for the best. But then you wrench us apart, cast woman on the arid desert to wander in constant thirst and miles of vision brutally uninterrupted. Man sat down to thrash about the wilderness, a wilderness of his own making, one he can't see his way clear of. Lord, you are a man of irony, there be no doubt. I think you've set the tone for things for years to come, lush wilds with fruit not infinite, yet for now abounding. But what do you think he'll do with all that fruit without Eve to ease it out to him? He'll choke on it, Lord, glutting himself like a dog, not knowing when to stop. You say we should have stopped before we started, and you blame Eve for reaching first. Repay the gesture with this barren desert, I can understand. But think about it this way. How woman's got the mind for something new, a kinder spin, and then perhaps I need that man and you. But aren't you the bully, God, made in man's crass image, Lord of great demand and taking all the power for yourself, not a sharing God at all, it's you or nothingness. You want Eve to believe that she was but a rib from the rack of the man you crafted in your own image. Maybe next time, think about the woman when you're bent on a bit of creating. Bring a woman's touch to the undertaking. See the fruit that woman's womb can produce, a sweeter fruit with your seed introduced. What do you say, Lord? Perhaps next time we can do better. Thanks. All right then.
Yeah. Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And with the recent Supreme Court finding, that kind of rings a whole nother way with me. All right, so how about we start with Mary Hawley? Mary.
All righty. I will do two poems. The first one is one that I wrote. It's about keeping vigil at two different times in a life. It's called Night Watch. In the way I used to sit alongside my father in the Pontiac late at night on country roads, the others asleep in the back, as night air made pungent by pine and skunk whistled through the little triangle window, and shadows loomed on the ceiling, taking flight when cars whooshed past and plunged into the dark behind us, and the Pontiac rumbled into the darkness ahead, following the bends and swells of the road, unwinding in the headlights that lit up dancing clouds of insects, and the windshield grew greasy with their smashed bodies, while I fought sleep, certain that only my rigid stare kept the car from swerving off its safe path. So now I sit beside him as he sleeps in the last evenings of his life, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and stay awake as if it could make a difference. Thank you. And then this second poem is from a collaborative project I'm doing with the Uruguayan poet Sylvia Goldman, where we're writing poems to each other and translating them. And this one begins with a line from one of her poems. The title of my poem is Here is the Wind, and the line is, cuando desciende un perro de sí. 1. A woman dries up from the inside out, exhaled breaths settling as drifted sand on the shore of a fading lake. She has a thirst like silk, a wanting. When does a woman descend from herself? 2. This is the lesson of heat. One must sit very still. Sweat glistens on the cheeks, the chin, the neck, the breasts, the cleft between them. The body must simply rest, hair lifted from the neck, while in the stillness, a fly crawls across the face of a clock. 3. A woman is made of many parts. Each day provokes another self-examination. Look, here is a brook, a thimble, a carpet. There is a cave, a flute, a wheelbarrow. A woman grows old, but for her, it is always new to be old. 4. All returns new, ideas and dreams emerging like spring leaves on old trees, held by the tangled roots of memory, to dance in the wind, but not be carried by it. And that's that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Beautiful poems. Oh, so who shall go next? Rusty, are you ready? I didn't give you any heads up, but I can give you a heads up.
Yeah, I guess that was a heads up.
Well, kind of, we can.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Actually,
but it looked like you were able. You didn't look like you were chasing your cat.
No, I wasn't chasing the cat. I wasn't going to read this, but in response to what you just read, Mary, the other side of wind. I was the fire consuming my life, but I was not the light, and I could not see the flames. Is it love, I wondered once, when steam clings to a mirror? Imagine how breath is dissolved in wind, how wind is dissolved in air. I loved my life without thinking, how paint loves what it paints. There was never any choice, like breath is not a decision. Was I happy? I was empty, which is much the same thing. Why else would heat rise and cold fall into itself like days into darkness? I was as poor as a stranger with no sense of direction, unable to find the right words. Still, I was slow to recognize the flow of loss, the way an animal dies by the side of a road, finally solving the mystery of breath. Oh, so that was it. And this is a persona poem. My life as a houseplant. My roots told me what I needed before I needed it. The soil held me closely as darkness. Night rises from there. Day grew quietly, a whisper beyond the window I could barely hear. The sun moved across the window and made a shadow of me. Was I happy? I couldn't say. I could blossom, so many faces turned up, all mine, listening to the sun. The girl who gave me water would lean over my blooms to breathe. This was the way she knew me best, the way I spoke to her. Some nights, the girl stood and stared into the refrigerator as if remembering something lost. Her lips were moving, but there was no sound. The last pot held me until my roots split it open. She carried me beyond the window to bury my roots in the ground, and I was found by sparrows and squirrels. I thought the window was the world. Now I see it is a mirror. Thanks.
That's so great. That's so great, Rusty. So We will bring up to the non-existent mic. We have no mic and you won't be brought up, but Mimi Rosenbush, glad to see you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to read a poem called Word Trekking at the Bridgeport Cafe. The blonde wooden chair, sturdy like a 1959 Chicago Public Library, demanding straight posture, ready to take a deep breath, ready to write, ready to conquer a card catalog of possibilities. And one can only happen when one free writes, exploration and discovery. I'm Sir Ernest Shackleton, I'm Sir Edmund Hillary, and every Nepalese Sherpa who came before or after conquering this morning on a desert island expedition. I would not choose Shakespeare, but my 57-year-old thesaurus. Its pages logical, alphabetical, aerogram thin. I word trek, a walking stick supporting me as I trudge. Or is it climb? Not march, nor walk, nor saunter, certainly not parade. Tread is closer, but it's trudge. The best I can do is trudge on with my walking stick, and even though my Sherpa thesaurus has left me an inadequate word, this failure is a teacher that all answers are not there, all words are not there. Where did the Bridgeport Cafe find these wooden chairs and tables anyway? Were they rescued from a Chicago public library? The first chair forces straight posture, the second an unforgiving ottoman hard as a stack of world books. The cafe plays invisible chamber music, so I don't really have to listen, because if I really listen, I will lose my way of writing without pause, without correction, without failing, without falling down the chasm of word trek exploration that comes not from dictionary or encyclopedia, but from my thesaurus. And what does one do with Microsoft Word when it forces a capital letter? Hey, who's in control here anyway? At least my walking stick holds me up and steadies me in case of a stew moment, which inevitably comes as I stare out the cafe window to 31st Street and imagine our first date, an early 1970 November night in Urbana. I sit on Stu's lap because there isn't enough room on the bus. We both look out the window at the passing trees on our way back to campus. Maybe we doze off. We were young and about to be in love forever. Take a breath, then write. Take a breath, then write. No longer fearing reader or misunderstanding. Learning the cello cut through that glacial anxiety. In Iceland, I took a photo of a glacier. It's my screensaver. I always loved Iceland from afar, and after Stu died, I traveled there with my daughter, Lara, on my 66th birthday to take photos of the January aurora borealis, which I did. And the number 66 was everywhere. Why? Because Iceland is 66 degrees latitude, and because it was my birthday, and because Stu was 66 when he died, and a week before, he asked me if I was going to travel to Iceland. And I did, Stu, I did go. Did you know that glaciers make far better screensavers than the Northern Lights? I'm about to topple off this icy mountain from too much splendor and too much grief all at once. Thankfully, I have my walking stick, faithful as a thesaurus. After so much trekking, do Sherpas still look in wonder to the Himalayan skies?
So nice. Thank you, Mimi. I just take a little moment to welcome all the people who are watching on YouTube right now, who our readers can't really be aware of them because it's two different things, but we have a nice little audience on YouTube. So hello, and thank you for being there. We have two people who've identified themselves, Chris Wilcox and Tara Betts. So welcome, you guys. Nice to have you there. If anybody else on YouTube identifies themselves, well, we'll just give you a little shout out. Who's next in the open mic? Another Robert, Bob Chicoine, Bob Chico. Let's hear you.
All righty. I got the usual bunch of shortcuts so you can zone in and zone out as you wish. After the power's been restored following an outage in midsummer, how nice to unseal the house after it is cooled and open one window to bring back in the wind through the trees that I grew so fond of listening to for these 2 days. The Avengers. Most of us haven't time enough to vote once, let alone twice. So whenever I hear somebody talk about a rigged election, I think of Diana Rigg, siren of the 60s, whom I had a late virginal crush on, and would even now vote for her early and often in sickness and in health to be my sidekick, my faraway flame, my tall drink of water, my queen in waiting for our democratic norms. Writer's block. I attend a public gathering for inspiration, so if gunfire breaks out, maybe I will get to see my own blood spattered on the blank pages before I drop the book, before I drop the body. Mercutio. Gravely wounded in a gravelly voice, he figures the gods must love humor more than Romeo loves Juliet. Surely they will let him go on living as long as he stays funny. The next morning, the maid hangs the week's worth of wash from Juliet's balcony. Buster Keaton, restored print. We carry dry erase boards into the silent movie so we can talk to each other during the show. Orpheus wasn't even thinking of Eurydice when he turned around to look back. It had just occurred to him, oh, wait, I must have dropped my phone back there. Art house. Whenever you pour salt in my wound, I just imagine I am a large popcorn, easy butter, in the movie theater about to show a screwball comedy from before we were born. Leasehold improver. Climbing the steps from the underworld, wearied, unable to think of music anymore, Orpheus came up with the idea of the service elevator. Old cineast. He shuffles into the revival house wearing a greatcoat in midsummer with popped corn in one pocket, loose raisinets in another, and in the deep inner folds, the lost reels of the magnificent Ambersons. In the assisted living facility or in the woods where I go to not be found, or in the chaos of these times, in the afterlife even, should I ever need rest or an eternal simple fondness, I will just think of you falling asleep during movies. After he ran short of music, Orpheus timed each upward step with his heartbeat, but knew Eurydice, for her synchrony, was likelier to match hers with her breath instead, and so feared he was putting too much distance between them that she would no longer be able to see him far ahead for following. Then did all he could to slow his heart. I did not mean to be the canary in your coal mine whose death prefigured yours and gave you time enough to settle your affairs. But I hope as you sigh gently in terror or gasp in peace, you will remember a little of how I sang before I breathed the gas. Aperture. Whether by sharpened awl or puff of vapor, oh, you can punch an opening into any shut or indurate thing in the universe. So even a camel or black hole or thread of my wandering mind can pass, old love, through your needle. We separate like Africa and South America did long ago. Even with an ocean between us now, anyone from outer space can see one's bulge to the other's hollow, how we once fit together. And lastly, last of the patriarchy. Remaining star my old eyes can make out in the night sky is no longer just a body in space, but the gleam light years ago in your daddy's eye. Thank you.
So, Chico, a late virginal crush. Does that mean you were late to not being a virgin? Or it was
I know that it was taken two ways, and that's I should probably revise more than I do, but it meant late in the virginal period.
well, you know,
Crushes became
the ambiguity
carnal.
is just pitch perfect, as somebody said. Tina, Dan, or seeing as we were just talking about Orpheus and all kinds of other Greek gods and things, what you got?
Great, thank you. So the first one I'm going to read is this is from my book that was just released, and the poem is called "Humble Yourself Before the Brutal Lessons of the Free Black Child." My children are of another world, have glimpsed their godhood already, but haven't grasped mortality, my clumsy, dangerous babies. I'm attempting complex spell work in the dark, no muscle memory, no teacher. What little I know is cellular, what little I remember, ancestral. I hold my godlings underwater. They thrash until they realize they are breathing and need not destroy me. One day their godhood will outgrow mine and they will swim beyond my reach, as it should be. If I am a wolf, you are a lion. If I am a river, you are a rock. If I am a star, you are a nova. Did I birth a black hole and or a galaxy? What just happened?
Actually, I think you're back. You froze for a moment.
Nothing you heard me say.
We heard your voice, but your video froze. So.
Okay, all right, so. Did I birth a black hole and or a galaxy? If you're an explosion, I'll be a controlled burn. If you're a sharp edge, I'm a tempered blade. If we fight and I lose, it was so you could learn to lose and survive. Listen, to lose, pay attention, and to learn to survive. So that's that. And I'm going to do one more that is not in the book. And it's called What They Didn't Tell Us Young Folks about Anita Hill. And this is just a series of cinquains tied together loosely. Facing such betrayal from the people she served, truth didn't flinch as she told it. Courage. Hand raised, surrounded by rows of men like shark teeth, closing, consuming, all in a day's work. It's work. Angling to break a Black woman, just work, like their fathers and their fathers' fathers. Angry at the way she couldn't be made to cry out. Who and where she came from scared them. Power. She held in hand protection she'd carried all the way from Oklahoma to wield. Confirmed our ancestors' cruelest nightmare, hiding from the weeping freedmen that haunt his blood. She knew what moving cost better than being moved. Chose to spend her inheritance on truth. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice, Tina. Who's next? Patricia McMillan, are you ready?
Yeah, it's follow Atina. That was really lovely, Atina. What are your earrings? Who's on your earrings?
Billie Holiday.
Ah, excellent. Okay, I have two poems. And I have a puppy who's bugging me, but I'll try to ignore him. Life is a crooked path, full of bumps and potholes, pitfalls and hairpin turns. This road will appear straight only to others later, after you've died, and they stand around the casket discussing the way in which you completed or didn't your mission that was clear to them from the moment you were born, though you questioned it every 10 minutes. One day you'll roll your car after hitting black ice, and once you regain consciousness, these same people will tell you, God meant you for something important. That's why you're still here. You may even think this about yourself, but let me tell you, if all you do from there is recover enough to go back temporarily to being similar to the person you were before, which will likely be quite an effort in itself, you'll have done fine. It's like riding a saddle bronc or a bull. Staying on the beast for 8 seconds is enough for you to be remembered with respect by anyone who will later claim to have known you well, even if you lose your hat. And my second poem is partly in Korean, but you will understand it because most of it is translated. It's called Bubble Tea. At Cafe Bim Bam in Daegu, I read aloud from my Lonely Planet phrase book, 2012 edition. Annyeong haseo, hello. Ne, yes. Anio, no. Then louder. Chan migugin inde Donald Trump chikchi anasoyo, which gets a big laugh from my husband's friend, who says it's anyone's guess how much longer Koreans will put up with their crooked president, Park Geun-hye. Last night, 2 million citizens marched in rainy Seoul, their candles flickering, their chants for Park's resignation strong. We'll go tonight, candle apps downloaded to our Samsung cells. But tomorrow we fly home to resume responsibility for everything, probably Korea's troubles too. And I guess I really kind of have to confess that Chon migugin inde Donald Trump chikchi anasoyo, which is actually a quote from the 2012 Lonely Planet phrase book, the translation is, I'm American, but I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I don't know why it was in there. I just thought it was funny. Thank you.
Gosh, and I thought I had a lot to apologize for at George W.'s election when I was in Europe. I didn't vote for him. Yes, we are stupid Americans. Charlotte Hart. Charlotte, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. It's nice to see many people I've known, but it seems like we hardly have seen anybody for so long. So this is nice. In 2018, I saw a piece of digital art on Twitter, and I wrote a little something. And then I saw another piece by this same artist, abstract and digital. And I wrote a little something, and we kept doing it. We never talked to each other. He just sent me abstract digital art, and I sent him a poem. And when the poems got too long for Twitter, we did it via email. We've done it for 4 years. And the first year, I was sending some things that were very personal and intimate. So I wrote to him and I told him, I don't want you to think this is an invitation. And he said, I'll always respect your poetry and let's just write to each other. And so our conversation has been only art and poetry. We didn't talk to each other for over a year and a half. I mean, write to each other, anything but art and poetry. But then I thought, I am sending some pretty personal stuff to a stranger who lives in Juarez, Mexico. And he's sending me things and never talking to me. So I thought I'd better find out something about him. So I wrote to him and I said, I just need to know something about you. Who are you? And he wrote back and sent his Mexican identity card with his picture and his age and his address. And he wrote that he'd been married twice and was separated from his second wife and had 7 children. And from that time on, we really didn't talk to each other much anymore for a very long time. That first series of poems and pieces of artwork have just been published. And it was the very oddest thing because I never submitted a manuscript. I just thought this was my private life. But somebody talked to a publisher and said, this is a really unusual thing. And he wrote to me and said, I'll publish your conversation of art and poetry. And I thought, sure, but he did. And it's being printed in Colombia now and will be released sometime this fall. These are just a few little tiny poems from the book. It's called Desert Flow. And it's now digital too, but it actually will be a book, surprisingly. All right. Slanted shelves are groaning under ripe, gaudy colors and juicy flavors of trees and bushes, offering the passion of their roots. Gorgeous skins, fuzzy, rough and smooth, with perfumes of tropical celebration, black zapote, dragon fruit, papaya, bins of clicking pine nuts, soda bottles in crushed ice, cold bubbling beer, with white foam sliding down the edge of a glass and a deep kiss. Night on a desert path, we walk in silence. The moon is almost full, only a slight sound of sand crunching under our boots. There is a cat. It is walking ahead of us. We stop. The cat is walking slowly. It stops. The moment is still. We are transfixed. With shocking speed, a hawk comes from darkness, sinks its claws into the cat, and carries it up into the night. Worlds. The aroma of pear blossoms in Puglia, budding plums, tiny pearls of promise, bees hum in Nara, red seedy fruits hanging on the pomegranate branches of Padamaram, the heavy laden walnut tree in Wausau, Wisconsin, woody walnuts falling into cupped hands below, the glistening lychee fruits offered in Guilin, all this flowering and giddy fruiting, you are mine. The will of the river goes in its golden flow. You know its shimmering touch. The currents carry you, sunlight submissive. You are the boatman, the boat, the river, the flow, the going beyond anything can show. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was a great story too. It's amazing. It's really
It was
something.
shocking.
It's really
It was unexpected, and I don't know. It was too easy, but it happened.
that's great. I was gonna call Mike Pilkin next, but oh, you're there. Your screen unlocked. Your screen locked for a minute. But Mike, if you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready. Is my screen good? I hope. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go. Here's two new poems. One is called Night in Chicago. In the night, I will trudge 8 blocks in the snow to a troubled lake. In the night, I will wander among the shoplifters who are shapeless and lost. In the night,
Mike, we
in the night,
lost you.
I will slide.
I wonder what you think about the idea of asking Elaine to read and see if Mike's signal clears up.
Yeah,
What do you think? All
I think
right.
that's a good idea. Elaine, you want to, Elaine Nadal, and then we'll go back to Mike. You were getting a choppy mic.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. Hello. I'm going to share 2 poems back to back. The first one's called Blue Bridge from my first book, Sweat Dance and Cut. And the second one is called Daughter from my second book, When. So I'm going to read them back to back. If you understood, you know that my song isn't about cherubs, cherry blossoms, or a charming prince. Is an empty rocking chair, a wind chime, a chromatic harmony, a holler, a wrinkled shadow, a distant heart, a familiar stranger with calluses on his feet, a wanderer eating rice with bare hands. Blue notes to wash the soil, blue notes to gather the soil, blue notes to part the sea. Crossing is hard, cross is heavy. Caterpillar can't swim, horse can't fly. Blue notes to wash the soil, blue notes to gather the soil, blue notes to part the sea. In my dream, I was a doll on a revolving pedestal, a doll with long black hair, wearing a white dress that sparkled like father's cold blue eyes. He taught us how to see the world, a space of suffering with few pockets of joy, with people who love you for a moment and then discard you after you fulfilled a purpose. In my dream, people loved me. I was beautiful. My smile was a sunrise reflecting only what I wanted to show. Father was good. He worked overtime. Father was bad. He beat us with belt buckles and pulled our hair. Father was good. He beat us because he wanted to protect us. Mother told on us. Mother was bad. She knew it would get him angry, but she wanted him to love her. In my dream, no one saw me cry. Father hated crying. He said it shows weakness, so he got mad instead. Mother cried all the time. When father came late, when he called her ugly, when he hit her for looking at a man's chest on TV. It was all for our own good, father told us. His mama never beat him. His daddy never beat him. They gave him away. They let him go. Blue notes to wash the soil. Blue notes to gather the soil. Blue notes to part the sea. I'm looking for a lullaby that can help me fall asleep. A blue light, a blue dream. In my dream, I was lonely as I am now, standing on a rotating pedestal, smiling before an audience, and crying when my back was turned. Thank you.
Really nice.
Just in case you didn't notice, we have like the best open mic anywhere,
Yeah.
which I love. This was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I do remember you from before. It's good to see you. So Mike, think you're getting good reception now?
I have no idea, but I'm going to just read these and hope they come across. So these are two poems I've written recently. First one is called Night in Chicago. In the night, I will trudge 8 blocks in the snow to a troubled lake. In the night, I will wander among the shoplifters who are shapeless and lost. In the night, I will illuminate the barracuda-faced men gentrifying the West Side. In errant alleyways, slick and serpentine. In the night, I will gather a soul assembly and converge on the Dan Ryan Expressway. In the night, I will shave my presence to more than a single integer. In the night, I will scramble my array of vegetables and street smarts. In the night, I will assert my rights as wind hangs icicles on pizzerias and elms. In the night, I will burnish a reflection that is perishable and unafraid to drown. The next one was inspired by my teaching at the Federal Detention Center downtown. And boy, when you're around these guys, you whether they're guilty or not guilty, you understand that that these people are so much more than what they've been charged to have done. This is called The Astounded Soul. The astounded soul rises before the man. It hovers as the man fills his bedclothes with breath. It hovers in the ecstasy of being part of everything that is. The soul then returns to the man, who awakes to the bitter struggle he calls happiness. He tiptoes to the bathroom, not wanting to wake his new love, and then past the children asleep on the floor. He leaves to kill pigs, or fix garages, or semi-automatic weapons, or bless those caught between gunfire, or prescribe antidepressants, or wrap the knuckles of those too slow to step back from their prison bars, or grow the wealth for those who have the wealth, or make porn, or dig posts, or clean bathrooms before breakfast, or look for work, or steal painkillers from his co-worker's purse, or gamble on the L, or grow beans, or teach poetry. Thanks.
Wow, thanks, Mike. Yes, this is an awesome open mic. And before we move on to our features and I hand off to Nina, I just want to again thank all our friends out in YouTube land who are watching the stream. A couple others here that a number of people here in the open mic know. Michael Warr is out there watching, and who else do we have? I'm looking through the list here. I mentioned Tara and Chris, and Denise Harper Saxon is out there. So some friends in the YouTube world. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we do like to pass the hat for our features. So we've listed a donation link. When we were in the real world, we would pass an actual hat. Now it's a virtual hat that it's a donation, and you'll see it goes through the After Hours Press website, my website, but all those donations go to our features. So we share it equally between the two. And so without further ado, Nina, you want to introduce our first feature?
I do want to say that for next month in August, we have Lanny Montreal confirmed. And I'm waiting to hear from the other person, but be here next month. And I'm just so loving people who find us and leave messages for us on the group page and say, hey, I want to throw my name in the hat. So we get to hear all these new voices. So you might have heard me say, Andrea Change, people who give so much to facilitate poetry for others, it's just too easy to forget that they are poets in their own right. So, and I know that that's happened for you. And so I was just blown away to hear your work at Michael War's reading. And God, it has been so long since, given the history of the Guild complex, which is where we all met each other. And now you're running it. So Andrea Change is a hometown girl born and raised in Chicago. She's a graduate of Northwestern with a master's degree from Roosevelt. She's been an active member of Chicago's literary community for more than 20 years. And her work's been published in the past in various journals and poetry anthologies from Tia Chucha Press, Power Lines, and Stray Bullets. Her poetry was also included in the Steppenwolf Theater production, Words on Fire. She's currently working on a book of memoir poetry and prose inspired by her experiences growing up on the West Side. Andrea is the executive director for the Guild Literary Complex. And what that means is you're probably carrying it on your back. Am I right? She currently lives in Chicago's Rogers Park neighborhood with her two dogs, Sasha and Missy. Andrea, I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you, Nina. And I am super, super humbled. One, for you inviting me. Yeah, Tina. And also listening to all these really great poets. I know Mike and Mary are great poets. And I know Al and Nina are great poets, but it's lovely to hear Charlotte and Atina and Bob and Mimi and all the other folks who read. It makes me think about when you talk about passing the hat, back in the day, years ago, the only reason you read a poem is because it was cheaper, right? It was $5 if you didn't read, and it was $3 if you read. So the $2 extra got you a glass of wine. So it was like, I'll read a poem and I can have a glass of wine. So that was how you got by.
Wine? That must have been a long time ago.
Yes, it was a very long time ago. And Ziggy was very generous at the Chopin back in the day. So you got a nice pour for your $2. So yeah, the Guild complex is still out there. We're still doing things. And I would like to think that I'm carrying it on my back. That is not the case. There are lots of volunteers, including our board members like Michael Pewigan and Mary Hawley, who's a volunteer with Palabapura. Without help from those folks and some other folks out in the world, it would just be difficult for me to do the things that I do, especially during these tough times. So a poet once told me, and I'm going to get started, that the title of your poem is like a window to your house. It tells people what's inside. And on that note, this poem is untitled. So it is like stepping into the small iron tub at Grandma Hattie's house in Holly Grove, Arkansas. Muddy from walking the mile-long dark rain, drenched road after midnight, black night, too dark for this city gal. Where are the doggone street lights? Dark, still summer heat at night. My uncle let the headlights stay on till we get further down the road. Since the tire got stuck walking, I've never seen so many stars. Like a purple black carpet overhead with party glitter sprinkled on. I lost a shoe. Not an important shoe or a fancy shoe, but my only other shoe. Now, ankle high in mud would have been more fun without adult supervision. More fun if sleep weren't a factor. More fun if there were worms. But my uncle says there may be snakes. Grandma Hattie knows we are coming without the tropes of modern technology. Finally, at the porch, us kids were stripped down to underwear. She ushers us in. A pallet prepared on the floor. It's like camping, my boy cousin said, and there we slept under the big fan, underneath the mattress part of the let-out couch till morning. There will be homemade biscuits and lemonade in the morning, but I digress. Again, it's like stepping into the small iron tub at Grandma Hattie's place in Holly Grove, Arkansas. Muddy. 4 muddy cousins and about 2 inches of brown well water. Tiny penises and hairless girl parts be damned. I hate it my boy cousins can see my girl parts. I hate the brown water. I hated the wet dirt road baked dry overnight, and the child in me that loved books so far hated the South, hated the freedom it gave me. Imagination lived in books, not outside, thought my young intellectual self. The mud disappeared from our bodies, but the brown water remained the same resilient brown. Rinsed with the same brown water, we were clean, but clean was a relative term since we were quickly clothed and we were shooed outside again. I resisted, found the local paper and read. A quiet could be invisible. I caught on town news and melted into the old country house walls. The words grounded me and gave me comfort. Live chickens walked the grounds, busily pacing a bustling chicken metropolis, while the women snapped greens and picked peas. Family talked, shouted, laughed, and Uncle was threatening a switch for sassing his older sister. My grandma was a giant, robust woman, but Uncle was superior in size. How could she win? No matter. The conversation existed outside of my bubble, but with that one upward glance of bewilderment of a word I overheard, I was found out and made to go outside, sentenced to play tag and it with my boy cousins, made to laugh and run with my other mud rescued shoe, catching lightning bugs at dusk, explore and be free. And some of these poems are old, and if you've heard them before, I apologize, but if not, yay. This poem is actually called Geometry. The rough texture of the cottony fabric is soft between my fingers, like this cloth remembers the folded pile sits between my father and me, a question. I stare, waiting for an answer. My father grabs an end that is suddenly there, thus begins the lesson. And my side of the story, making the bed. This is a woman's job, I think. Where is my mother? My father fluffs the cloth sheet mightily into a cloud above my head, and I am in mouth wonderment at what seems like the kind of magic only my daddy could do. He pulls the fabric to the mattress, jarring the cloud he created. I turn to giggles as instruction turns to misfire, the rectangular mattress refusing the advances of the equally unsquare cloth. He smiles easy yet sternly, wanting my attention, adjusting the fitted sheet, begrudgingly cooperates, huddling the corners like a night beat cop. Order is preserved. On to the next step. The husband of the first cloth has all the same features, but no curves, just corners. My father begins to explain the structure and forms of bedding, like poetry. I am in my father's army, learning the importance of geometry and corners. I begin to understand why this is my lesson and why my mother is hiding her bruises and making dinner. He teaches me to iron sheets on the bed. Pillowcases and blankets come easily, and in the end, it is a masterpiece that awaits my slumber. This is not a lesson my mother could give me. I try to teach my sisters, but it does not take. I am beaming and prideful with my father, refusing the image of the monster whose anger broke mama's ankle and forced her to wear sunglasses all day long, even at night, for days. Only sharing this with my father could bring joy to this task. Every morning, I dutifully make the bed. Think of my father, the storms that came on so suddenly but never harmed me or my sisters. I smile each time remembering the things we shared, among them the importance of geometry, army corners, and poetry. I alone seemed to withstand those lightning flashes of anger, the easy smiles and calm of enchanted cloud sheets shared just between us. So the first poem that I read didn't have a title, and this is a story that explains the poem. In 1975, the family trip to Arkansas this year was mandatory. It was always in May before the weather got too hot and the mosquitoes got too thirsty. Normally we would stay home with my dad, but there was trouble brewing in my parents' marriage that would come to a head in a few years. Another story, another time. Preparation for the trip was the best part. It was the only time you could go shopping at the store and pick out whatever snacks you wanted, but the rules were make it big, make it shareable, make sure you like it, and make it last. You do not want to be the one who picked Fruity Pebbles, Rice Krispies treats that no one else likes. There was also chicken fried and sandwiches made for the road. We only stopped for gas, and no, you can't have a treat. There was no bottled water then, so airtight containers of Kool-Aid were made, but no sippy cups. If you spilled your drink, that was on you, literally. And God help you if you spilled it on somebody else. The few kids that came were divided up in cars, usually 3 kids to a car. It was a convoy of Buicks, and my grandmother and her sisters were big into CB radio, and each one had one in the car. One kid was always relegated to the front in between 2 adults, which as a kid sounded sweet, but there was always something to do. Hand me the map, pass me my drink, change the station, give me a piece of chicken. No, I don't want a wing. Hand me a napkin. It was an 8-hour to-do list. The goal at the rest stop was always to talk some other kid into the front seat, telling them how cool it was. The truth was the back seat wasn't much better, but once it got a little quiet, I could read. I would pack at least 2 to 3 books, but the mentality from my family was, what you need books for when you're going to be outside anyway? Not me. I loved my books and would find a spot to read no matter what or where. The trip was uneventful until we got close and there was a storm. By the time we got to the road to Grandma Hattie's house, it was so thick with Arkansas mud, the cars could barely get through. So we had to walk a mile in the dark, in the mud, in the middle of the night. Holly Grove, Arkansas was the family homestead where my great-grandmother Hattie Cokes resided in a small 2-bedroom house on a huge plot of land. The tiny house raised 11 children, and since there was indoor plumbing, it was considered modern by some standards. I don't know how many, but we all huddled in. The married folks got the 2nd bedroom. My grandmother slept with my grandmother Hattie in her bed. There were 2 let-out couches, and if you were lucky, you slept on top. And if you were a kid, you slept underneath. Yes, under the couch. It was like camping, my cousin said, except the spiked metal parts never snagged your braids, pulled at your t-shirt. The next day, Mama Hattie was in the kitchen and made hot biscuits. She grabbed some eggs from the chickens in back and finished off breakfast for all of us. If you didn't get enough, then you weren't getting fasted enough. After breakfast, about 5 of us boy and girls were tossed in a bathtub of brown well water. I was swatted once on the butt for complaining, like I knew the water was supposed to be that color. We were cleaned and clothed and sent outside. Outside, there was nothing but an old trailer rumored to be full of spiders, 4 old dogs, and a bunch of chickens. Mean chickens who did not appreciate childish invasion of their space. I was about to find a quiet spot for reading when my mom called me to come with. They had to go to town with all the clothes since we were all dirty and sweaty from the night before. I was excited. Great, a town. We loaded laundry and headed to town. I dreamed of bustling streets, stores, buses, and people. What I found was a sleepy 2-sided street divided by train tracks from the Amtrak train. Sigh. This was the same kind of overhyped mess that got me in the front seat. Fooled again. Somehow we had a ton of clothes, more than the coins we brought, so I was sent to get change. I stood in front of the laundromat in this sleepy town looking for where I could get change. There was no signage. Every building looked the same. I had gone to the store next door, but they said they didn't have change. but I grew up in the city, so I knew what to do, what I was taught in school. I grew up with Officer Friendly. I've got the coloring book to prove it. So when I spied a police officer, I politely sauntered over in my best 9-year-old white person voice. "Excuse me, sir, can you help me find change, please?" Before he could respond, I heard voices yelling my name, screaming and waving for me to come back. I politely said, "Thank you," and ran off. When I got to my mom, the yelling didn't stop. I was scolded harshly. I tried to explain my difficulties about finding change to no avail. "Sit down and don't move." Child ain't got good sense the Lord gave her. "I thought you said she was smart. You better be glad I don't beat your ass right here." I sat, bewildered, not understanding. For the rest of the trip, I was a fool to my family and the recipient of numerous mumbles, side-eyed glances, and ridicule from my cousins. My books were my solace for the rest of the time, and Mama Hattie say, "She don't know no better," and gave me a hug before we left. You see, this story is a non-story about nothing, a nothing thing that was something that could have happened. It would be several years before I realized that I had put myself in harm's way by talking with that policeman, a white policeman in the South. And I was young, naive, and Black. The boogiest of boogeyman nightmare visions could come to mind. Disappeared, beaten, raped, even murdered. My family knew. The calling of my name, their screams were pleas to higher angels to maintain my ignorance, my innocence. It didn't take long into my teens before I realized every officer ain't friendly. As a child, I had lived in the safety of a large family's love, never encountering those things that might harm me. I had not had the benefit of this education at the age of 9. But you see, we don't forget. Then it had only been 10 years prior they saw Black bodies being beaten on television during that faithful march on Sunday, Bloody Sunday. A 14-year-old Emmett Till had been brutally killed only 20 years before over a rumored whistle. Our bodies are full of generational trauma. We remember and feel every swing of the strange fruit. I have dreamt of being shot in my sleep, of a jog turned into a run, run for your life. Sometimes I worry if this generation is too far removed from those traumas, but it's more likely that there is so much trauma that it has made them reckless, like Toussaint Louverture, John Brown, and Nat Turner. So they are ready. They are so ready, ready for revolution. And I don't know how much time I have left, so I'm gonna read 2 more pieces. I like this piece because it's about my grandmother, and I still am, I would say grieving, but at a loss for her, not having her in my life. So I was challenged to write this poem about an object. So this is called To Sit Among the Living. She wanted me to sit among the living, called out to me, as she is wont to do. Sit with me, child. Already with me and gone, I sit with her, binding me, wisdom hiding in her old lovely bones. She makes all of my alone seem so right. I huddle in her arms, remembering a child's smallness. Whole days she loved me. Holds me dear with the tickling roughness of her skin, gives me laughter on this throne of mourning. In the end, a small remembrance of something strong, vibrant, and old grace. So stubbornly worn with the tenacity of living, bearing the brunt of my fear, worry, her loose threads of love. She understands me, understands why I am here. My place in her world is secure. Surely, maybe. Legs marred by scratches and dents, she is still yesterday's beauty. Oh, beauty. Known for rejecting frailty, she holds my tears anyway, somehow rocking her floral pattern scent still with me, rooting this awful yellow-green banyan tree. Marooned and lost together, I embodied with generational pulse. There were three, her, me, and yet to be he. We are commune, I, she, and memory. I slump silent, waiting for stories until sleep tastes me drunk with the day's elixir. I feel her softly warning whispers. Nighttime comfort awaits, and I am low to leave her. Just a quick thing I want to reference, a banyan tree. A banyan tree is, I want to say indigenous to certain climates, but specifically in Hawaii, and they're vine-like trees. And when one of the vines hits the ground, it begins to plant another tree. So that's why I referenced the term banyan tree. This last poem is a poem that Nina referenced. It was at the American Writers Festival. Michael War was scheduled to read with Quincy Troop, and Quincy Troop came down with COVID, couldn't make it. And Michael was like, you're not giving up my slot. I'm gonna invite all these great poets to come. And I just happened to be somebody he considered. It was like Elise Passion and Reginald Gibbons. And I'm like, why am I here? But he included me and I was grateful for that. At the time, I didn't have anything really new written, but this was a piece that I just written. It's an ekphrastic piece based on artwork, and I'm gonna see if I can show it to you. Let's see if I can get it close. The piece is called Burning Down the House by Robin Powers from an exhibit called Embodied and Endangered Bodies. No, Embodied and Endangered, I'm sorry. And I'm not sure why she called it Burning Down the House, but right away the piece like grabbed me and shook me, and this is the poem that came out, and it's a poem in 3 parts. And I'm struggling with the title, but right now it's called Unseen Eyes. Prayer. Number 1, like Tamir. Their downcast eyes are not guilty and unworthy of the lack of innocence denied. Skin color forever guilty of being a danger, but in danger, endangered species of Black boy, yearning for the wilds of concrete jungle freedoms. Days spent balancing on fences and avoiding the grisly consequences of sidewalk cracks. Shooting water from guns that were pink and green to cool the day, running just cause you wanted to be the fastest. Finding sweetness in backyard mulberry trees and penny candies. I blame Skittles. Now and later's never presented any such threat. Street lights and porch house play come with the night. Lightning bugs and mosquito bites. The faint smell of old charcoal and burned hot dogs filling the air. And there you come. She wishes. She dreams. She prays. Smelling like all outdoors. Prayer. 2. Breathe. I cast my eyes downward in denial. Accept this cowardice, I think. I am terrified of this season of night. Morning comes and I fear what the day needs from me. An unwelcome soldiering. But I am weary of this road, Lord, facing this dreadful fork, except there is only one way. Let me be weak before I rise. Let me first cry in the clouds of the mountains I am forced to climb. If grief is memory, let me remember it well and wholly, to mourn it completely what is lost. Let me sit in sadness for a while before I turn to stone, before I am brave and become steel. I must crystallize before I can shine in the daylight. Even now, I am terrified of this night. Prayer 3, a wish. Blushing, I hide my eyes from his gaze, ever worthy, but love always seems to question. The one that wraps me warm like a blanketed sunset. His thumb rubbing my palms center as if sweet fulfillment could be unearthed there. Bells chime me with lust and love, and is it true goodness? Gracious, warm yellow cake, deliciousness, and ooh-wee. Yes, ooh-wee. The day's endings glow holds my sight, but love always seems to question. Is it mine to have? Is it mine? Is it mine? Is it mine? Thank you, everybody.
Wow. I loved that poem back then. I love it now. And thank you for sharing that and the rest of your work. It's just so great to hear you. This last season, we've had a number of Guild people. We had Michael Reading and Luis Rodriguez and now you. And I miss the way it was. I really, really do. It felt like one unified community. It didn't just feel that way, it was that way. And I'm so glad that you're keeping it going. And yes, with a community behind you and alongside. Actually, I think it was a Gwendolyn Brooks. Was it a Gwendolyn Brooks award? Or whatever competition, the night that I met you, Timothy.
It is your, yes.
I know I was hugging on Avery.
You were, and I was like, I'm meeting Nina Corwin. We're having a love fest.
Yeah, and I think you took the pictures of him and I.
I did, okay. Right.
And that's it. I have not heard your poetry before, so I'm just so looking forward to it. Timothy David Ray is a writer-performer who works in poetry, plays, and monologues. He teaches creative writing and performance throughout the city of Chicago and its suburbs. Most recently, his writing has earned him a 2021-22 and 22-23 Survive and Thrive Changing Worlds Artwork Grant Award. And it might be interesting to hear what you're going to be doing with that or what you did to get it. And this summer, he was accepted as a 2022 Lambda Literary Retreat Fellow for Emerging LGBTQIA Open Mic Poetry Award. No, writers. Ray is a 2015 semifinalist for the Guild Complex's Gwendolyn Brooks Open Mic Poetry. Let's see, I'm gonna jump through some of this because I'd rather hear him than hear me. Solo Homo, 2002, 2011, appeared in books, magazines, Obsidian, a Journal of Literary Arts. I think Duriel Harris is involved with that or edits it. Musings during a time of pandemic. Did I say that right? World Anthology of Poems on COVID-19. I Can't Breathe, the poetic anthology of Fresh Air, both edited by Chris Okemwa. and Black Horse Review. His book of poetry and performance, Little Victories, was published in 2012 by Newtown Writers Press. That's a mouthful, and I am really looking forward to hearing you.
Hello, everybody. I love a good open mic and I love a good poetry reading, and these stories and these poems have been absolutely wonderful. And I can't think of a better way to spend an evening. Al was the first person to publish me when I got to Chicago in After Hours Press. And Nina and I met a couple of years ago. As she mentioned, I'm going to read a few poems, if that's okay, maybe some explanation in between them. And that'll be that.
Before you start, I just want to tell everyone that when Timothy's done, we're going to have a Q&A, so you get a little bit of the story behind the story. And there is a link in the chat or whatever for you to make donations for these poets. We really like to be able to give them a little token of our love. And that's all. Go for it.
So the first poem is about George Floyd. It works with numbers and silence. And I just want to talk a little bit about the numbers that came up to me and the silence that I'm referring to. There were 5 cops there on the scene for a fake $20 infringement of Floyd. George Floyd wanted or asked the cops to count him into the cop car, meaning they'd count him slowly down as they pushed him into the cop car. The bystanders used their voices to stop the murder. It is all they had. They could not reach him physically, blocked by the one cop. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "It was stupid for Kaepernick to make the protests," and then later recanted to Katie Couric, "Perhaps I should have remained silent." "9 minutes for George Floyd." This poem begins with 9 minutes of silence. This poem begins like this. If I could only and then if we as a nation had, or then maybe we would hand in pocket and knee on hand in pocket, and we are. This poem begins with 8 minutes of silence. This poem begins again, hands behind back, locked in, head pushed down into. 7 is for tear gas protesters. 6 is, and this poem continues with 5 minutes of. This poem continues like this. If only I could heave and again, under the pressure of. 4 is for knees on sports sidelines, for ing them. 4 is also for if only we had, and then we might have. This poem goes on with 3 minutes of silence. This poem goes on like this. 2 is for calling out mama. 2 is also for. This poem ends with 1 minute of silence. This poem ends like. Medusa tries a wig on. The gay boys hated it. Stood around her gazing in the mirror in 90s clubbing outfits with pitched out hands on hips. She, though, kind of fancied the thing, playing with the tendrils that didn't move or hiss or beg to be fed daily, hair that didn't leave scales behind in the bathroom sink or slither around. For once, peace instead of vigilance would rain from her crown at the high school dance. No more wild runnings away, no more shrieks from the Amazon delivery driver dropping off the smiling package that quickly turned to a frown, their every predictable fleeting to not catch part of her reflection in the dimmed front door glass as they led up to the front door for the drop-off. And this, maybe this could be preparation for a late night drive-in movie date with the popular crowd, dipping their hands in concert into the same bucket of popcorn, thrilling and swallowing sour gummy worms without the barrage of catcalls coming from behind, pointed at her head. The lack of likelihood to get picked last again for any team, just because it hissed behind the bleachers as someone runs their hands through non-living cascading folds, captured, controlled by the Aquanet, to go unnoticed, categorized as normal, not worthy of even passing time with gossips. But as she thinks, she slips it off. The boys behind cackle and leave the store, the places, the thing on the stand. One more look into the mirror, fantasizing, now frozen. Gallery 37 was what After School Matters was named, and it was actually at Block 37, where now there is a big mall that nobody goes to. There's a big white tent, and the young students from the city would take from master artists and poets and craftspeople and learn the trade and the arts. And sometimes I would go and walk in the tent, and this is what I saw. At Gallery 37. At Gallery 37, the city comes to us in pastel brushes with city buses, in clay and hardening enamel. Our lovely metropolis is x-rayed, not as pretty as glazed over glass. Sunset reflecting on high-tapped skyscraper. At Gallery 37, a bench becomes fair game for transition into artifact, looks tropical, abstract, topical, swings out from under us as seat. It is a sheet of paper for images, for image making, for all our worked backs, overworked for breaking. At Gallery 37, finger paints of 5-year-old Angela tell us, I wish we'd stop the killing. Scores of more, I wish, make for a wall eventually. The voices of young artisans from a tougher, rougher place reflects on canvas, on wood, on clay. A face-to-face. When we dare to enter the more sacred space of Gallery 37. So I took a cross-country bus trip, which I don't recommend on the Greyhound from here to California. Don't do it. But we made a stop in Wyoming at the crack of dawn. And it was at Laramie, Wyoming, where Matthew Shepard had been hung on a fence and then left to die as a LGBT hate crime. As I was there, I observed what I observed, you'll hear in the poem. And then when I got to California, I realized I was there on an anniversary of the time of the body hanging before it was found. This poem is called Laramie. To tell the truth, and here I must, There is not that much to it. Red rock walls high that wind their way to Laramie, daring you to enter the Tumbleweed Express, bus stop, shop, and trading post. Cattle that graze pastoral on the carpet of green, spotty patches, rolling, resting, ready to meet their maker in the beatific blue with a chew of the cud, a gaze upward and pool eyes for miles and miles, just the same, not a house or farm, nothing. Nothing. And then there are the fences. They are constructed like old Westerns, crisscross, making X's in the dirt, movie style. And it is not hard to see, not now, you almost say, of course. And miles of them, keeping in and keeping out. One might think of mending wall. Even the girl at the tumbleweed rings true as ticky-tacky Americana behind the counter, fit with feathered dream catchers that web their way to you. Sad, really, though I cannot pinpoint why. No, it is not hard to see how they came upon it, how it hit them maybe weeks before, perhaps driving, cruising the disappearing paths on Happy Jack Road, while kicking boots like cloven hoofs up and down the highway. If your heart must be tugged, let it snag on a fence in Laramie, where a lowly body hung, beat and broken, loosely lame. And if your soul resists repose, let it lie in a state of Laramie, where the devil sets up shop for saints and sinners just the same. So during the lockdown, I did a lot of walking around and the block, as I know a lot of people took on walking practices. And when it was open, I went to my favorite store, which is the Family Dollar store. This is called, it's an ode, and it's called Ode, O-W-E-D and O-D-E, to the Family Dollar store. It's after Joshua Bennett, Ted Kooser, and Ariana Brown. Ode to the Family Dollar store. Ode to off-brand shoe aisles, ode to smiles under masks, ode to tasks daily, ode to snacks, ode to litter on floors, ode to old men, Old Spice, oil of Olay, ode to empty shelves, ode to 30% off, ode to 20 and 10, ode to non-refundable, and then ode to cash only, ode to me, ode to poets who chronicle, ode to ironical and other made-up words, ode to herd immunity, to community centers and boys playing ball on the courts, ode to warm weather and shorts and shots at our three-pointers, ode to all the non-joiners, ode to millennials, here's to them, ode to gossip at the cash wrap, ode to old business, ode to new high-rise, ode to real, ode to us, ode to the CTA, ode to transit-oriented authority, ode to the man at the corner, ode to the woman too, ode to him, ode to you, ode to them that go by they, ode to hey, it's you, ode to spring, ode to may never find items again, ode to these, ode to please, ode to can you spare a quarter, ode to brick and mortar, ode to was there, was never again, ode to that was border, ode to hoarders and thrift, ode to just getting by, ode to sign at another dead end, ode to windy cities, ode to pities and regrets, ode to pets who walk their owners, ode to loners, ode to mist, ode to messed up finances, ode to glances that read like, I don't know, ode to shrugs, ode to no hugs in the apartment, the Department of Motor Vehicles, ode to ID, ode to that's me, ode to brand new cars, ode to Piper Plovers, Monty and Rose and larks on beaches, ode to speeches on TV that mean less and less, and oh, miracle happened here, finally, at the Family Dollar store. Ode to more or less leaving, ode to silence, and ode to grieving. Ode to store closing, ode to low income, ode to the new co-op market, to sprinkling new condos and brand new carpets, ode to the brands that no longer exist, ode to Irish Spring, Irish Mist. Ode to last lines in poems like this. Ode to 'twas great, 'Twas good is gone. And this is the poem I will finish with. It is a new poem. Let me see it. Oh, here it is. In the 80s, there was a film called Fame, which was about a bunch of multicultural kids who went to a New York high school. And they put on, one of the scenes, they put on an impromptu concert in the street, causing a traffic jam. Ben Stiller's mother played a hard as nails English teacher, and that's what I thought high school was, even though the actors were clearly in their 30s. And I wanted to go to that school. This poem is called Ode to Irene Cara. Irene Cara is one of the stars of the film. It begins with this epigraph. Fame, I'm gonna live forever. People will see me and cry, light up the sky like a flame, from the 1980s song and movie Fame. I want to stop traffic in Midtown Manhattan. Cradle you, vocalize the highs and the locals through the through line on the boom boxes, busting out windows, smoldering off side streets, pummel smoke, bounce off car doors as people have no chance but to force fling themselves downtown. I wanna have Ben Stiller's mom be my high school English teacher who goes way out of her way to help me, a brown, artsy skinned kid with promise. I want a sparkle side up right next to you, Irene. I mean, as your classmate glissandos the 88s with the backside of his fingernail on tusked ivory keys as you siren sing, please, out here on my own. I wanna transmit that 80s multicultural fever that'll never deliver. I want Ben Stiller's mother to be my ever-suffering, gravel-mouthed, trench coat wearing, for pocket knives at the school's front door checking, Kleenex blowing, hospital hallways sobbing, inner city commuting, Big Apple taxi cab driving, performing arts, high school English teacher who never got enough. I wanna. Irene, you know, even back then that big things do fall, even in New York City. That's all I want to sing. Stop traffic, Midtown Manhattan. Good. Now sing it again. Thank you.
That was great. Timothy, that was awesome. And Andrea, God, the two of you, what a magnificent feature tonight. Thank you so much.
No, I know. Just, and bringing up so much history. Let me just get here, get galleried here. And so, so Andrea and Timothy, thank you so much. Are you ready for some questions? I want to start with a question, one for each of you, about the background for one of your poems. Andrea, the last one that you read with the picture, what was it that called out to you about the picture, and what kind of resonance did it engender?
There was a stoicism about the image that really sort of spoke to me, like almost immediately. And that was really sort of the thing that caught my eye, and that they were all sort of looking down or had their eyes closed. And so when I started writing it, the first thing that I wrote about was Tamir Rice and I think somebody had reminded me that his birthday was coming up, and I was at the memorial at the Stony Island Arts Fair, Arts Bank rather, and but it didn't feel like enough. And I thought, okay, so how do I write more? And so the piece sort of started to evolve into 3 parts. And so the Tamir piece is easy because that's sort of me as a kid, and you want to be Tamir Rice's mother, who I had a chance to meet, wishing her son could be a kid and still come home at night, and he can't anymore. And the second piece is personal. And it's funny because when I wrote it and when I read it, it's funny because I memorized it in my head, because there are times when I need to hear those words to give myself a break. I'm dealing with a health issue. And so I have to remind myself that sometimes, you know, people are like, you have to beat this, you have to fight this. And I'm like, you know what? I don't always feel like doing that. I don't always feel like being like, you're strong and you can take it. And I was like, you know what? I just want to sit and be sad about it for a minute. And then the last piece is just about, you know, how we are in love, but we're constantly questioning, is this real? Is it something, you know, it's, you know, I don't get that tingly thing anymore. And he just, you know, left the stench in the bathroom kind of thing. And you're like, do I still like this guy? You know, that kind of stuff. So it's like all those things that make you question it. So it was, if I could get into the head of the stoicism, this in the head of these what I envision to be women sort of mastering whatever consuming issue that they're dealing with. So that's how the piece came about. Nina, you're muted, I think.
Nina, yeah.
Thank you. Timothy, I don't know if you mentioned the name Matthew Shepard in your Laramie poem, but you know, it was 24 years ago. And when you started the poem, it just took me back and reminded me, there was something that felt like a first about that particular murder of a young gay man, even though it was not by any means. There was something particularly shocking, maybe the gruesome details. And it feels like a really stunning piece of history. And I don't know how old you are, but I'm just wondering about your relationship with that piece of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's it's obviously a white male, good looking, white male murder, and so it was definitely publicized, at the time. I would like, I think it was really not post, but it's part of that MTV, it was pre-internet, and it was sort of that MTV, Pedro Zamora, AIDS, and, the real world. And we're getting kind of fed these images through MTV and television still in the 24-hour news. And so we're not quite at the internet yet. And so images are really important. And, that just, it was just a frightening, and I think you used the right word, the gruesome, and just the history of, I read George Floyd and to open, and the history in this country of lynchings and hangings and the body being on display, as it's horrific, it's horror. I think gruesome, it's horror. And when I went into I woke up and there's he says Laramie, it says on the thing, and the sun's coming up and we're all kind of groggy, and you have to go down. You're going below sea level to get there, and you're passing all these red walls, it's just very Old Testament, maybe New Testament sort of revelation, it's just, and then you expect something and it's just that. It's these, as far as the eye can see, these fences and this little tiny place called the Tumbleweed Express. I mean, it's like someone painted it out of a Pulp Fiction novel, and in those places too is where this horror lies. And so the saints and sinners line, and the two the guys who committed the murder, something happened where they actually were in the hospital at the same time that he was, and there was some altercation with them, and so they were lying in the hospital beds in the same hospital, obviously not in the same room. And so this idea of benevolence or no benevolence, what's going on here? Is it nihilism? What's happening? We have a history of the old Westerns. We have a history of this, folks. This is not something that they just invented. They're wearing cowboy boots, I imagine. It's Happy Jack Road. Everything's fine. With these, the Tumbleweed Express, everything's fine, folks. And then the real horror, and the history you're talking about is sort of uncovered then. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. On that, I'm trying to get back to my gallery view here. I actually remember mentioning Matthew Shepard in a poem written about that time. I don't want you to have to give away your age, but can you place that in your own history? Did you hear about it at the time?
I am over 40. I'm well over 40. That's what I will say. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think I was coming of age, I think that's kind of my I was coming of age, and my gay, queer coming of age was done. I really would like to think that it was done kind of on my own. I mean, making family, there was no rejection from my family necessarily, but it's an awkwardness. Oh, no, we have this case. So what are we going to do? What are we doing? What do we do? And again, there were organizations for parents and what have you, but it's all about who's comfortable and doing that dance. And so I really think that I was fed by, and I think a lot of my work, as you hear, is like about people, about images, about image making, because I'm of the era of like the glossy magazine, the supermodels, like where we really were fed images by someone who controlled those images. We didn't have the phone and we couldn't make the images ourselves. And so it's really interesting to me that these images, this hanging on the fence, the neon, they become iconic because they're intentional. They become iconic because they're intentional. It's an intentional violence, right? And there's intent behind these crimes. You know what you're doing, right? And so when I read the George Floyd, it's sort of like a very calm, right? If you could see it, there are lines like a student worksheet, you fill in the blank where the silences are, just like Chauvin was very calm when he committed the murder. He was calm, right? And so it's a very calm delivery, it's methodical, it's numbered. So, I mean, it ties into the history of the United States. It's unfortunate and it breaks my heart.
Yeah. I think you're pointing out the thing about the images and the glitz and gosh, that wonderful thing, play with the words neon by the way. That was well done. Well, and I bring that up to say the glitzy and the images, because you both have had experience with a merging of poetry and theater. And I don't know exactly what I want to ask you. Well, actually, Andrea, what was that thing that you did at Steppenwolf? What was that about?
Andrea, you're muted.
Damn it. I was swearing a lot, so it's a good thing. I'm just kidding. I'm not sure how, I don't remember how it came about. I believe it was connected to the Guild Complex and Michael War or somebody like that. And they recommended a piece that I had done that I think is in Power Lines. I can't remember. They wrote it really campy. I mean, they performed it really campy, and it was, you know how you have this vision, and Timothy can relate to this. When MTV was around, everything, you visualize everything as a video because you wanted to be, I wanted to look like this thing. And so I had a visual in mind of what the poem should look like. And they did it like super campy, like we're riding in a car. And I was like, that's not what happened. So I was really disappointed with it at the time, but not realizing the breadth of ground that I was stepping on by having my poem performed at Steppenwolf. All I was like selfish is like, I am an artist and you destroyed my work. But it was great to be a part of it. And Steppenwolf has actually continued doing that, but I think they've been more intentional with one author sort of developing the work and sort of trying to incorporate their vision. But this was probably the first time they put a toe into sort of dramatizing literary art that wasn't a play. So back to Steppenwolf, if anybody knows anybody on the board, I was honored. Please ask me again.
What you were saying puts me in mind of how some people will say, and this was my experience working with the composer, Pat Moorhead, that once you give up your poetry to have something done with it, it's out of your hands. That's different from a collaboration. I'm sure there are other places where you get to have a hand in the final product, but it's watching your baby go out into the world and not necessarily like all the things that happen to that baby. So here's what I want to do now. I want each of you to ask the other one a question, something that you'd want to know from them about their work, or preferably, but yeah, that.
That's tough. I will say this, I'll ask a question, and maybe it's a commentary that might lead to more conversation. I really appreciate, and one of the things that stands out to me, and is a thing with the Guild, when we do Brooks Day every year, we ask people to read certain Brooks Day poems by Gwendolyn Brooks, rather. And we asked him to read this poem, and I don't think at the time it was like, oh, we're gonna ask this gay guy to read the gay poem. But having him read it, like, put so much weight on the poem that wasn't there before. And it was memorable because, of the way he read it. And that's the beauty of Gwendolyn Brooks, right? She was an observer, so she got something out of it. And as a reader, he was able to channel that. But I am concerned, even as I read the story that I read about being in the South, and even as you talk about Matthew Shepard, that we have become obsessed with giving our traumas over into literature. And I wanted to ask Tim, do you feel that it's important? Do you feel that it's necessary? I don't want to say, do you feel that it's necessary? How much do we have to, I think there was a joke that, as a poet, you have to learn to bleed with your work. Do you think that's important for that? Or do you think it's sort of a passing thing?
I'm gonna quote Roxane Gay, who says that I give equal amount of time to pleasure and pain. And I was looking at the poems and I was thinking, oh, these are kind of dark. I think it's important. A tragedy has a certain zing to it that just, grabs people. Writing humor is often, or comedy or something lighter or light verse is really frowned upon, and it shouldn't be because it's a talent. It is, as much as tragedy. It's harder to write comedy. I'm just going to divide them up like the Greeks, comedy and tragedy. But I don't think it's a passing. I mean, we look at, we wear the mask and we have this tradition, these traditions of, and even with Gwendolyn Brooks and, the Chicago Defender sends a man. I mean, it's just every time I read that, I've read it a couple times for y'all, it's just like, and here we are again, Highland Park, the shootings happening again, Black bodies. I mean, it bears repeating, I guess. I think it does bear repeating. I think that the New York Times just had an article that said now Black playwrights are having this problem because it's all tragedy and afterlives. And so now we've created our own trope. How do we get out of that? So it's interesting you're asking that question. And as a playwright, I have to wrestle with that. And I've worked on a play that now I'm actually shopping through Lambda Literary that deals with exactly that. So either I flip the tropes completely on their head, or have to say it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and look at the world. Observer and Gwendolyn Brooks was, influential in my life. We look outside, and I don't see a lot of comedy.
Well, I think that like in the story that I wrote, the goal was to sort of flip the story. Like you don't know where it's going.
Yes, and I like that a lot.
So it's like, I'm just this bored city kid, but I didn't, and it's a true story. Like I really didn't know what I was doing wrong. Like I had no idea, but my family knew, and nobody ever explained it to me. I don't say it in the story, but no one ever said, do you know what could have happened to you? Like I was like, I don't know, there's a police officer, but nobody said, do you understand this? And it wasn't things that you talked about. No, and this, even as a gay man, nobody's gonna say, do you remember Jeffrey Dahmer? Don't go out with that trick, blah, blah, blah. Nobody says that. Nobody tells you that this danger is sort of, I want to say assumed. Yes. And I don't know if that's part of our culture, even with other ethnicities. It's like, you remember the Holocaust, or you remember this and that kind of thing. It's like it's like you don't get told, you sort of have to learn the story or overhear the story. So that was the challenge with telling that story, because I never ever was told why I was wrong. I had to learn it like later on.
Later on, yeah.
Much later.
Much later on, yeah. And that's key, for better or worse. That timeline is really important when you learn it,
Yeah.
When you learn it, it's very important.
I'm noticing the time, and Bill, I hope we can go over a little bit. Let me know if we can't, but this conversation was so great. Timothy, do you want to ask Andrea a question, and then we'll call it?
Yeah, I'm always curious. I think what propels my work is like one question, which is probably when and where do I enter? What one question propels your work? If you could put it down, I don't know if you've, thought about it or whatever, but just, what one question or phrase or idea would you say I have my own ideas having heard your work now. So what one central question would you say propels your work?
As a kid, for me, and I only have 2 younger sisters, but my mom had 10 other brothers and sisters. And so when I say I grew up, so the idea of family, and those of you who sort of have like this robust family, like I didn't just have like 10 other uncles. They all had like a brood of children as well. So when family got together, it was like, you know, at Christmas time, 40 people in the house was not unheard of. And 12 of those people were children. But when I write a story, it generally will start with somebody or some memory from family. Even, and I'm thinking about a poem that I wrote a long time ago, but there's a line in a poem that I wrote a long time ago that says, there's blood on the doorpost and there's blood on the doorpost and on the sides, the angel of death crosses by. And that line is, you know, about the plagues of Egypt before Moses, blah, blah, blah. But what I remember is watching the 10 Commandments every year at Easter time with my grandmother. And that struck me at this thing. So that's why that line is in the book. So it's a memory as a child, as opposed to a memory from the Bible, but that's the thing that impacts me. So in my mind, when I read that piece, everybody knows it because everybody knows that visual, right? Because everybody watches the 10 Commandments at Easter, all 4.5 hours of it with their grandmother. Maybe not. But yeah, so I always enter it which is why I'm trying to write memoir poetry before it became a thing, because I want to tell those stories about my family, or at least versions of it as much as I can. It's like a photo album for me.
I wish we could continue this conversation for the next couple of hours, but I thank you both for not only your work, but this conversation. And it really reminds me how I wish there were more opportunities to get together and just have these kinds of you know, hanging outs and hangings out, and talking. I also want to mention what a great open mic this was, and for those of you who reached out to us and or anybody who's watching on YouTube, if you want to throw your hat in the ring by sending us a message to the Traveling Molly's page on Facebook, or if you know our emails, reach out to us. Al?
Yeah, well, what else can I say? This was, you know, an amazing night and great conversation. It's just such a shame that we can't walk out the door to the bar next door and continue, you know, but unfortunately we're on Zoom and we have to say goodbye, but you know, things are opening up and we're going to be seeing people around, I think, this summer. You know, like Andrea mentioned earlier, Printers Row is coming, and you know, there's different events and open mics are starting again, and it's, you know, one of those things we all miss, being with each other, but we still get to share our poetry here in this way, and it was awesome tonight. Really, thank you so much, Timothy and Andrea. Really excellent job.